Hi, everyone. My name is Betsy Stratton with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and I'll be facilitating today's unconference. Thank you for joining us for the effective strategies for engaging industry partners in your research session. Your speaker today is Peter Fisk. We're going to get started with the presentation at this time. The session is going to be recorded, and I ask that everyone stay muted initially during the initial presentation. And then if you have any questions, unmute yourself and ask those to Peter, or feel free to put them in the chat box if you prefer it that way. Thank you very much, and Peter, take it away.
Good. Thank you, Betsy. And hey, everybody, I'm glad to have you all in the room today. I'm going to, the way we're going to run this last session, I've got only about 10 or 15 minutes of comments. And then at this point, I'm going to open up the floor and we can have an open discussion. This issue of effective strategies for engaging industrial partners in your research is not just one specific to NAWI, because the NAWI program emphasizes collaborations with industry. It also, I hope, is going to be a way for you to make your research more effective in general. So some of the advice I have is specific to NAWI. Some of the advice I have is just general advice. So let's go. So I want to start by emphasizing that this is your hub. Okay, this is not DOE's hub or Kelly Speaks Boxman's hub. This is your hub, and we mean it. Which means that the tools that we're putting together, the HiveBright tool, these unconference sessions, are intended to help you be effective. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create a new portfolio of water treatment technologies to enable desalination in a much wider range of applications. So it's a big job. It's going to need not just your creativity, but your creativity combined with what our partners can bring. And again, our partners are doing a lot of stuff. Of course, our major partners, the Department of Energy, funding us to the tune of $110 million over 5 years. We have $33 million in committed partner funding, largely from the California Energy Commission and other California state agencies. We can talk about that a little bit as well. So let's get to it. Let's talk about these partnerships and how you can make these partnerships the most effective. So you remember how we've structured the hub. We have a sort of a theory of action, and that is we have a research consortium of national labs, universities, and university partners. If you are a current research performer in NAWI, your organization's already a member of the research consortium. If you are not currently a research performer, you will join the research consortium and sign this very long document that dictates all the things that your organization needs to do. But basically, what we've tried to do is get all these organizations on the same playing field with respect to doing research and sharing results. But that's not just what NAWI is about. We have this larger thing called the NAWI Alliance. And that's, what we're interacting with today in the Spring Unconference. It's a broad, no-cost membership organization designed to encourage and foster collaboration between researchers and other participants in the greater water ecosystem, including we have in the Alliance universities, other national labs, et cetera. So it's a nice way for people to get engaged without having to commit into the Research Consortium program yet. So our goal in all of this is to create a community where researchers, high impact research problems, and research sponsors can all find each other. I will also point out that a number of the people in the NAWI Alliance are themselves sponsors of research in water treatment. So the Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI, sponsors water treatment. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation sponsors water treatment research. And so it's not just about NAWI and NAWI funding and NAWI projects. It's also about meeting other sponsors and helping align your research. So let's talk about this issue of building and nurturing your professional network and building collaborations. And I say not just with respect to NAWI, but even beyond NAWI. Now, I know when I talk about the word networking, it can sometimes seem kind of uncomfortable to some people. And I get it, because it feels awkward to reach out to people you have no connection with. These are strangers, and to kind of ask maybe stupid questions, and that feels uncomfortable, etc. And I know the other feeling that at least researchers often have is, hey, I'm a subject matter expert. I've got a long CV. I've got all this expertise. If they're interested in such and such, they should come to me. And, that may be true. But I want to emphasize for you that networking is not some schmoozing thing. It is simply developing professional relationships with people. That's all it is, developing relationships with people, in particular, people who share your professional interests. For example, industry and other researchers. And finally, alerting them to your professional abilities and interests. That's all networking is. It's basically developing relationships with people who share your professional interests or technical interests and alerting them to your professional abilities and interests. That's all it is. It is not that, okay? And not only is it not this, but like super aggressive schmoozy people are often not really good networkers. You know why? Because they're not very genuine. You are a talented individual. You've got some resources. Maybe your organization has some resources. And so it's easy for you to be sincere. This morning, Matt and Jennifer showed us around our new HiveBright environment where you can find every current member of the NAWI Alliance. I like to think of this as sort of a Tinder for water nerds, where you can look around and find out different organizations that are represented. But I want to show you exactly how I think you should use this tool as you explore research projects and research ideas for NAWI. So for starters, search for people. You can search for people's names if you know them. You can search for company names, and you will find all the users who are involved in a company. You can also search by type of company, and as Matt illustrated soon, we are going to be giving everybody a list of probably like 200 specific technical keywords. You can put keywords into your profile, and then people, if they search for capacitive deionization or flocculation, and you are an expert in that field and you've got it as one of your keywords, they can find you that way. So the search function is how you find each other. Okay, so let's say, I'm interested in this upcoming notice on a call for proposals in the area of what we call precision separations, okay? So I would like to know more. Maybe my research group is working on this area, but I would like to understand what are the current capabilities of certain products. So one can go on to, for example, the DuPont website, and in the DuPont website, you can dig in and find information about the current capabilities of products that these people have. And frankly, this is really critical because when you submit proposals to NAWI, we're going to ask you to explain how your technology or approach improves upon the current kind of best approach to water treatment. And the easier you can say, hey, relative to DuPont's AmberLite technology, which only has a loading capacity of about 3%, our novel sorption technology can be loaded to potentially 20%. And this research is going to extend the capacity of ion exchange in this area. So you give us a very clear exactly where the impact is going to be for your research. Now, is that, of course, unlike LinkedIn, in the HiveBright site, we have provided everybody access to emails for each other. And this is very important because I know people don't want to get spammed, but that's what we wanted to do in the NAWI Alliance, is give you an easy way to reach out to other people. In addition, technology providers like, say, DuPont, excuse me, there are a whole bunch of other people in our NAWI Alliance. There are people like Joe Gicangelo, who is a senior technical expert in Stantec, which is a consulting engineering firm. Joe is on our Industrial Advisory Council. He is also an incredible reservoir of knowledge in subjects. You now have the ability to contact Joe. And so I know it seems like, oh, well, is he going to be? Well, maybe, but I think that probably everybody on the Alliance wants to connect. And here's how I suggest you do. If, for example, you have a research project idea that you're working on, just drop Joe an email and say, hey, I'm a researcher in the NAWI Alliance. My group is working on blank. You can fill in the technology area, which is a promising way or approach for doing what? What specific treatment objective or process improvement is your technology oriented to? As we develop our project, we need to learn more about current methods to do that application and their limitations and general cost. Could you help us find a subject matter expert in this area that we could speak to in order to gain a better understanding of how our research could lead to performance improvements or cost reductions in this area? And Joe will write back to you and say, hello, it's good to meet you. I would be happy to introduce you to this person. This person is in our organization and they have ample experience in this area of technology, and they can give you a better understanding of the current baseline performance for this, okay? That is how you do this. So how much of this should I do? Well, the answer is, I think that if you are working in an area of research on water treatment, you should have at least 6 to 10 conversations with subject matter experts from industry, because that can really give you a good lay of the land. It gives you a sense for what are the key performance metrics associated with the technology. Let me give you an example. For years, the research community was very excited at pushing the frontier of improving the flux in reverse osmosis membranes. How can I get more water to pass through at lower pressure? Well, it turns out that a more detailed analysis showed that greater water flux does not actually help you that much in lowering the cost and energy of desalination. Greater selectivity does. And so a lot of researchers, having not really engaged with industry, were running down the track of improving flux, when with a dialogue with industry, they might have learned sooner that the key objective is making these membranes more selective. So that's an example of how and why these conversations are so important. And subject matter experts, people who are either technology experts or end users, are what you want to find. Also, you don't even need to talk to these people. Much of the current baseline in technology performance is published, but not in the peer-reviewed literature. You're not going to go to the library. You're not going to go to an Elsevier journal to find this. You're going to go to the company websites and you're going to download product spec sheets. Or you're going to go on the website and ask, can I talk to a technical sales representative? And it doesn't matter if you're not going to buy the stuff. Ask the technical sales rep some basic questions about how these products are used. Now, another thing you can often find on company websites, which again is not in the peer-reviewed literature, is industry-specific case studies. These are essentially short stories that industry writes about their products used in specific applications. And it's one really great way for you to understand the specific application scenario and the key product benefits as the company understands it. Sometimes the key product benefits are not cost. Maybe it's something that we don't think about in our research, like, this material is a lot safer to handle, or this material can be easily recycled, or this material can be has higher kinetics, so I can need a smaller volume of material. So those are things that you can learn by understanding how current technologies are used. Don't forget also, a large fraction of our NAWI Alliance members are industry end users. These aren't people providing technologies like DuPont or Toray or Hydronautics. These are people who are buying those products for their water treatment needs. You may recall that we had a webinar just last month with, I think it was BHP, the mining company, talking about what challenges they face in the water treatment environment. If you called Jacob and asked for what he knows presently about species-specific sorption for selenium treatment, Jacob could give you the current best understanding that they know about where the treatment technologies are at. And you could then ask him questions about what improvements would be the most important. So these end users are often the people with the best insights into the limitations and costs of current treatment technologies. And that's what you want to know as a researcher. It's like, what am I up against and how can I move performance forward? Or can I think of the problem in a completely different way? If everybody has to use a very bulk separation and sorption material like granular activated carbon, what happens if I have a species-specific system? What other parts of the treatment train get totally re-altered if I have a breakthrough in a certain area? So I'd say in general, honestly, the number one recommendation I have for you in terms of professional networking is to be curious and seek out and consider the needs of others. So how can I, as an early career researcher, or as where I am in my organization, how can I be of value to these other people? What subjects, issues, or work experience or relationships do I have that might align with the needs they have? What are they trying to achieve in their work? What negative things might they want to avoid or minimize in terms of either technical challenges? How can they be of value to me? Well, what subjects or issues or work experience do they have that might align with my needs? What am I trying to achieve in my work? Well, I'm a researcher. I'm trying to do novel, high-impact research. So what negatives am I trying to avoid or minimize? Well, I'm trying to avoid not getting funded, right? I'm trying to avoid picking a problem that's interesting but not terribly useful. So there are lots of things that I'm trying to minimize. I will tell you that I think that within the NAWI Alliance community, everybody has agreed to the following. They are willing to have an initial communication or meeting with you, okay? If there is not an obvious, mutual opportunity, then maybe it doesn't proceed from there. But I think everybody's agreed in this community to have that initial conversation. So let's give some thought to what the needs might be from an industry partner that you approach. Okay, so these industry partners, they need a lot. For starters, many times they don't know the absolute current frontier of research. So they need water treatment expertise. Oftentimes they are also looking actually for people. They're looking for insights into the latest emerging technologies relevant to water treatment that they need to do. They are often seeking quick answers to specific questions. What's the latest in X, or would this be possible? And you might be qualified to give them that answer. Of course, many of them who are dealing with water and water treatment are looking for technological advances that improve water supply or water treatment for their application. And this includes improving along all the metrics that we have outlined in the NAWI program as the pipe parity metrics: cost, energy, reliability, quality, etc. But remember that each of these parties might have water treatment issues that are very specific to their organization. So, for example, Teck Minerals in Canada is keenly interested in developing better ways of removing selenium from mine drainage. The California Department of Water Resources is actually interested in a broader set of more drought-resilient water supplies for the state of California. So these are things that you may not know what they're interested in at the outset, but once you talk to them, you will. Also, I think they are interested in any opportunities you can give them to improve products or processes. So in general, industry partners are seeking solutions to problems they have in water supply or water treatment, and or improvements to the products or services they offer. Now, this can sometimes lead us to very specific and incremental approaches to improvement. And don't get me wrong, incremental improvements on something that's used today could be very, very powerful. Let me give you an example. A current company, Aqua Membrane, they're actually a member of the NAWI Alliance. They have an ability to take a normal membrane and print the spacer right on the surface. Rather than using a separate material with a webbing or something that lays on top, they can print the dots right on the surface to hold the membrane open to allow fluid to flow. Now, the big advantage of that is that you can put dots in a very sparse set of locations, and more of the surface of the membrane is available for the water to flux through. That seems like a very simple approach, but it offers a modest but very valuable improvement in the overall performance of the membrane because there's more membrane exposed. So that's an example. Very specific problem. How do I improve the performance of today's membranes? Answer: I can print spacers right on the surface, and I can improve the amount of surface area. Pretty simple, great result. Wonderful partners and wonderful company. So if you're curious about them, reach out and they'll be happy to talk to you. Also consider that there are what I call target-rich environments. And I know we haven't had access to a lot besides our laptops these last year and a quarter, but we are going to still have environments of trade shows. Now, I know that most of you researchers have never been to a trade show. And it's a really strange environment. It's sort of like a carnival of technologies, and they typically don't have technical talks. They typically just have a bunch of booths, and you wander around, but you can go and meet people in these companies and ask them key questions about the performance of their products. Now, technical and professional conferences are also a great place to meet people, and one key set of people I always look for in a technical or professional conference are the people coming from industry. So let me give you one example. The North American Membrane Society, NAMS. NAMS is largely an academic community of researchers, but it also has people from industry showing up. Those people are excellent people for you to reach out to. The final thing is public events. Believe it or not, public events can be a place where you can learn about current treatment technologies, especially if the public event is something to do with water. So what are the most likely needs from researchers? For those of you who are researchers on this in this session, what needs do you have? Well, obviously you're looking for partners, both industry partners, but also research partners with aligned or complementary capabilities. Many of you are contemplating working on treatment steps for specific contaminants. Who has a great and well-calibrated system for analyzing for that contaminant? That's an example of an aligned capability. Sample access might be an aligned capability. As I said, analytical capabilities, just materials and equipment to support a project. Now, you know that every one of our NAWI projects has a requirement of a minimum 25% cost share. And if you haven't built a project yet, maybe you even in your research haven't encountered a program that requires cost share. So cost share comes in many forms. The most common form of cost share is not cash. It's actually what we call in-kind resources. So an industry partner is going to give you water samples, or it's going to give you data sets. It might actually give you stuff of specific value, which can actually be counted more or less as cash. So the hours that they spend talking to you and supporting your research, the equipment they loan you, the supplies they give you, or the travel that they support for themselves, that is all stuff that we essentially consider as cash, and it's a contribution into the project that you're building. The final thing is cash, and cash is great because it is hard, cold cash that can flow into your organization that can support you and your fellow researchers. The other thing that you need is future opportunities, not just the current NAWI opportunities, but you and your students are going to need jobs, and these people are the place that hire. You are also potentially going to need partners for other research programs beyond just NAWI. So I would say that you as researchers, for those of you who are researchers, you're seeking opportunities to work on high impact, high quality water treatment research, and our partners in industry and our end water users are the people who can give you great advice about where the most important problems are. So I'm just going to kind of give you what I call a sort of a quad chart. If you're thinking about how do I approach or how do I build a successful collaboration with an industry partner, I like to think of a quad chart called the haves, the needs, the gives, and the gets. Okay? This is a way for you to understand the value that's going on both sides in a collaboration that you're building. And this could be with an industry partner. It could be with another university partner. It could even be with another collaborator in your own organization. The haves, the needs, the gives, and the gets. Let me give you an example. Let's say I am a researcher and I am working on produced water treatment. In fact, I just attended the session in the spring conference that the Texas Desal Association ran, and they told me that one of the key areas that Texas is investing in is the 5 billion barrels of produced water coming out of the ground in oil and gas production areas in West Texas, okay? So I am interested in novel technologies to more efficiently treat that produced water for other uses. Here's what I have. I am an analytical chemist, so I have experience with high quality chemical analyses. I happen in my laboratory to have a nice Orbitrap mass spec. I have a whole complement of analytical tools. I actually have some experience analyzing water from the Permian Basin. And my advisor has a relationship with ConocoPhillips. So we already have one friend in the oil and gas sector. But here's what I need. I actually need an industry partner who needs lower cost produced water treatment and can provide me with samples with a large range of hydrocarbon content. Maybe that's the specific area that I want to focus on. And I need that partner with a specific access to particular types of water. I also need some cost share of one form or another. And I also need some information about the current cost for treating produced water in the same basin where I'm going to be getting my samples from. Okay, so that's what I've got. That's what I need. What are the gives? What am I going to give in this partnership? Well, I'm going to give a research collaboration in which we produce high quality water analyses and we test feasible, lower cost, total organic carbon removal treatment. Okay. Now, maybe another thing I can give is that my university is willing to put in 10% cost share a month of my advisor's summer salary, for example. And what can I give? I can give plenty of advice on anything I know. So I can be an accessible resource for my industry partner. What do I get? Well, I hope I get all the things I need. I need a research collaboration. So I need water samples with provenance and access to sample sites. I've run through my budget and I need about $75,000 in-kind cost share, but maybe that can entirely be comprised of samples and staff time. What I also need is a detailed flow sheet with cost and energy of current produced water treatment. Now, that might be sensitive for my industry partner to share with me. So maybe what I need to do is execute a separate NDA with them so that I can receive those data but protect it from being released in anything that I do. Okay? That is an example of the haves, the needs, the gives, and the gets. What we're trying to do here at NAWI is not just support interesting, cutting-edge, early-stage applied research in desalination. Certainly, we want everything you do to be high quality and publishable. But we also want it to address real and important problems now or in the future. So the combination of publishable and practical. And then finally, we want it to have high impact. We want you to focus on water treatment scenarios that would involve creating significant volumes of new water. So NAWI and NAWI research, we hope, can be in the intersection of all those three things. And that's the end of my prepared remarks. I'm going to turn off the slide sharing, and I'm going to go back here and stop sharing my screen so that we can have a conversation. Let me find the console. Well, that was a mistake. I don't want to press that button again. I'm back. Don't worry. Hey, everybody. I would now want to turn it over to you. That was my prepared remarks, but I welcome everybody to raise your hand, make comments, any reactions to what I had, or questions that any of you might have. So go ahead and use the raise your hand button. It's one of these actions here. You can raise hand. See, I can raise my hand there, and I can lower my hand. And that's the way you do it. So let me know what questions you have, and we can go around and find people. And if I don't have any questions, I'm just going to call on people I know and friends that I have. So Dan GMR has a question. So Dan, what I suggest is, why don't you go and just unmute yourself and you can ask me the question directly. That's probably the best thing to do.
Great. I should be unmuted and you can probably see me as well.
Yeah,
so,
great.
Thanks.
Good to Dan, how are you?
Very good. Very good. So my question is, often when you're talking with industry, issues of intellectual property and a non-disclosure agreement will come up. And so what's your strategy for doing the networking without getting bogged down? Because so that people are open enough that you can actually understand where there's an opportunity, but also not give away something. I think on the university, sometimes we don't appreciate that we actually have intellectual property and we give things away too easily. And then from the industry side, you know, just navigating what somebody's going to be willing to share and what they're not going to be willing to share. How do you navigate that?
Thank you. It's a great question, Dan. So for starters, it is often the case that people are willing to have a general conversation without an NDA. And I will say that as members of the NAWI Alliance, we have also, everybody who's signed that alliance agreement has already kind of agreed to a general framework of honoring, kind of people's intellectual property and various things. So in general, what we try to do is, first of all, people who are invited to this party were invited, right? So we expect a general sense of collegiality and fair play. The second thing is people should not and probably will not disclose things that are substantially proprietary. And so if you ask, hey, can you give me the cost data for this latest treatment plant? They might say, well, no, not really, or it's in a range. Or maybe you could ask, are there any other resources you can point me to? And there are ways to kind of bound the questions that you have without necessarily asking something that would make an industry partner, kind of unable to respond. Similar with researchers. When we think about intellectual property, it is often the case that if you have an NDA, you can freely disclose this information to another partner because the NDA means that it was not publicly disclosed, and it will preserve you and your university's rights to eventually protect any intellectual property that you're disclosing. So an NDA is often a very easy way to allow you to freely discuss information and preserve the rights that you and your inventors have to secure the rights to that invention. If you can't sign an NDA, and I will tell you, some of our industry partners, especially smaller companies, are very nimble. They can sign an NDA in a day. We have large corporate partners where it has to be like taking up several wickets. And so you sort of sit there and sometimes you wait, and sometimes you even ask yourself, God, is this even worth going through all the labor of an NDA? Sometimes you just have to, as a researcher, say, I have a new methodology. Unlike the current methodologies, it has this general improvement, and we think it could get to X, 3X, 4X. I can't disclose any of the details, but I can certainly tell you what its impact would be. So maybe rather than having to share the details, let me just ask you a question. What would a 4X improvement in capacity give you in your treatment systems? And that way of not talking about the technology, but talking about the capability of the technology might be one way to better frame the conversation. And Dan, I would also say it's inevitable. I would say that we are creative people. We get very excited, right? So, I think that even if we get to the point where people feel like, hey, I'm uncomfortable, or I think something came out that I don't think should have come out, please let us know. We operate with this alliance agreement so that if there's any concerns, you can always fall back on the NAWI team to say, hey, we can sort this issue out. But thank you very much for bringing that first question to the table, Dan. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Peter.
Good. I'm going to scroll through here to participants, and I see that Deb Agarwal had raised her hand. Deb, what question do you have? And if you also want to unmute your camera so you can see us and we can see you.
Thanks, Peter. So my question is, you talked about the wants, needs, and haves. And I think that's a great way to frame the conversation. But the challenge that I see is that often what the other party needs from the researcher is something that's not research, is an incremental thing that they would like help, analyzing or something. And how does NAWI view sort of asking for funding to also do that so that we can get the data or things like that?
Yeah, it's a great point, Deb. It's like you sit there and say, well, I'd really love to collaborate with you on this. And they say, yeah, I'd love that, but I've got this crud that's showing up in my filters and I don't know what the hell it is. Can you analyze that? And I will also say that many researchers have access to excellent analytical facilities. So I guess I would simply say you do this, you encounter these issues all the time, Deb, where you're beginning to explore collaboration. You're trying to figure out what things of value do I have, and again, in partnership with a partner, I think that this question of, well, I want to explore this general area and they really need help here. Could that be part of the project? The answer is quite possibly. Structure the research structure the statement of project objectives and see if you can include that specific work that they want to see accomplished. I will also say, Deb, that the organizations that have positively signed into the Alliance, I think are coming to the table knowing that this is a relatively early stage applied research program, that this isn't a group of consultants who are ready to do like a design CAD program or debug their software or do something like that. So I do think that that for the most part, the people on the industry side are recognizing that we're advancing some long-term things as well. And I think that many of them, I guess when I talk to people on the Industry Advisory Council and kind of ask them, like, what's your motivation? Why are you spending the time on the Industry Advisory Council with NAWI? Well, the first thing is they want us not to waste our time on stuff that's not going to help. Okay, so they do have a vested interest in us focusing on the right objectives. Another thing, frankly, is that many of these organizations are growing. Water and water treatment is becoming an increasing priority for them. And even if they aren't particularly working in the field that you're in, they might be interested in your grad students or your postdocs. There may be a way in which you represent another resource for them in the future. And then the final thing, honestly, Deb, is that even in a single conversation, people always learn something. And, heck, it beats working for half an hour. Sit down, talk to somebody at, hydronautics, learn a little bit about desal, and if nothing more comes from it, you've at least had that half hour of being exposed to some other idea. So I would simply say that at a certain point, I am believing that Alliance members here are interested in partnering in research. They may not end up finding anything that is ideally suited to them, but everybody who is in that HiveBright site is at least motivated to look. And I think that's the most important thing. Does that answer your question, Deb? Are there any other dimension you want to bring to the table?
Yeah, no, there's a specific question for you, but I should take that offline.
Okay, good. Let's see, Saeed had a question. Saeed, are you there? Let me see if I can find your icon.
I'm from Oak Ridge National Laboratory. I'm a R&D staff. I work on this HPRO project. So
Great.
I always hear a non-scientific talk more than scientific talk. Like I read your scientific work. So here I have, so this talk is very nice. And I have two questions. The first question is that, so let's say my technology, one of the technology I'm trying to pursue, which is far away from industry practice, but which has the potential to make a change. For example, I'm interested in solar desalination, but the current desalination industry are not familiar with solar energy. And if I reach out to them, they said, hey, I'm not familiar with solar energy. I'm not interested in collaboration with you. And if I reach out to solar industry, they said, hey, I'm not interested. I'm not familiar with desalination. So reach out to the desalination people. So in that case, how can I pursue those kind of industry? This is one question. Second question is, if I reach out to your administration, is there any way that I can reach out to your administration who are more familiar with the industry and who has the face value? Where I'm a new scientist at Warren and people do not know me. So is that, can I get help from your administration as well?
Let me answer the last question first. Again, I am hoping that everybody who is in the NAWI Alliance is at least, coming to the table with an understanding that people are going to reach out to them and that they should reciprocate. So I would hope that anybody would at least answer your first email site. Okay. Getting back to the broader question, you raise an interesting point. I'm interested in the combination of solar and desalination. And I don't know, the first question, Saeed, is I don't know where that's useful. So for example, you might ask any general desalination person, where is solar used for desalination? And the answer is many of them say, well, I don't know, we don't do that. We are a big coastal desal. And the answer is, why wouldn't you use solar? And they would say, oh, well, obvious, Saeed, it's too expensive. I've got access to very cheap, high quality electrical power. Solar's never going to be helpful for me, so I don't need it. Oh, okay. So then in your mind, you say, So one of the key problems about using solar for desal is it often, most of the time, the solar energy is more expensive than the other energy source that they have. Where is solar not more expensive? Then you ask yourself, maybe there are environments in which solar power actually makes sense, where it is the cheapest, or maybe its modularity makes it the easiest, or maybe it's small scale, which makes it easier to deploy, rather than running power lines many miles. When you begin to ask yourself, not just what the technology is that I'm working on, but what are its qualities? What are the value propositions associated with solar power? Well, it has zero carbon. It is modular. It can be deployed quickly. What are the disadvantages? It can be expensive, and it needs sunlight. Okay, so I'm already beginning to realize that in my scheme, my research project, my vision for solar power desal is going to fit with a specific environment. Now, who can I go to talk about that? Well, you know, a great person to talk to? Maybe I should reach out to somebody on the NAWI Alliance who's had experience building and funding desal projects in an arid environment. Maybe somebody like, I don't know, Kevin Price. Kevin Price is a member of our alliance. He's a retired former director of research for the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. I bet I could talk to Kevin for half an hour and he could tell me the whole story of where solar power makes sense for desal, what are some example installations, and where does it not make sense. There I am, half an hour later, much more enlightened about how my research area aligns with what segment of the industry. So that's my suggestion to you, and that you gave me an opportunity to give you a hypothetical. And by the way, I'm scrolling down here. I'm actually not sure. Kevin Price might actually be on this call. Where are you, Kevin? Kevin, I'm not sure Kevin's on the call. Anyway, maybe he isn't, but he is there in the Alliance. Go search on the HiveBright site for Kevin Price and then drop him an email. Tell him Peter sent you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. See, Anubhav has a question. Anubhav, how are you? Where are you? There you are.
Good. Yeah, I'm
How
in the
are you
Berkeley
today?
area. I'm doing okay. Had my
Good.
second stab a few days ago, so.
Hey, another Fowie ouchie. That's great. Ouchie. That's right.
So my question, I think, is related to Deb's question, because, you know, at the national labs, we often do more fundamental research, early stage research that's fundamental, has broad implications. Whereas, you know, I find that with cost share and industry, they're often interested in more specific questions, you know, narrower focus, things like that. So I had a question about, you know, how do you see that divide being effectively bridged where, you know, we take something that's maybe of specific interest to industry and transform that to a more fundamental thing that would be appropriate for the labs? Are there conditions under which that becomes successful? Are there strategies and things for that, crossing that divide?
That's a great question, Anubhav. Thank you so much for asking it. So, you know, one of the things, and I don't have a diagram handy, I don't think. Maybe I do. I think that again, the DOE and many federal agencies kind of operate in this idea that research and development is kind of this linear process, this march out of the mud of basic research to, an applied bench scale test, and then I'll pilot, and I kind of march through the TRL, or technology readiness level, up to the point where I magically emerge, you know, a commercialized technology. And I think AMO as an agency really understands that sometimes, even with relatively advanced or even commercialized technologies, the underlying phenomenology associated with it is not well understood. Or you sit there and say, well, how did you get to this point? How did you choose this material? Oh, well, you know, there's research here and research there. We ended up with this, you know, thing, and it's well established. Well, do you think it could be better? And the answer is, well, maybe, but I don't know. And this is where sometimes you can find early stage research questions, even amidst, you know, current higher TRL unit processes, unit activities. So, for example, a lot of times, and I think modeling is an example, a lot of times people are proceeding with a system optimized by trial and error, and they may not have a framework to develop a set of underlying models that would enable you to say, well, let me run through 1,000 different configurations or 1,000,000 different configurations, and let me see how much better I could do. Or if I make a 10% improvement in this property that you're relying on, of this one material in this one step, what's the overall gain I get in the system? So even though you're dealing and you're contextualizing your research with a relatively quote unquote mature technology, you're essentially bringing early stage science capabilities to some of those questions. So those are some of the things I would look for. The other thing is you could simply say, look, I know that, for example, sorption, I know that there's a current capacity constraint. I think in general that those capacities could be double or triple. My understanding is if I double or triple the capacity for this sorbent material, that is immediately doubles or triples its value, or it reduces its size, or it doesn't. So tell me in a general sense, if this material or this unit process gets better, how much better could it get? And can you give me cost data, or can you just be an advisor? Remember, one of the other features in the research program is that every research project has what's called a project support group, or PSG. These project support groups are small, maybe 2 or 3 people from the NAWI Alliance who are coming on to listen to your pitch, to kind of get updates from you. And they're not there as reviewers to kind of be critical and poke holes in your arguments. They're simply listening to you and thinking, how could this be aligned with other applications, or how can we strengthen this project? So another place that I think we as researchers could benefit from getting support is simply having members from industry on our projects in our PSG groups. The end of the day, Anubhav, the other thing is depending on what field you're in. It might be an industry partner who's a good cost share member. It could be one of our agency partners. So for example, if it's work involving California research, California DWR might be able to give cash support even for an early TRL project. EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute, they fund applied and relatively early stage research. So maybe EPRI could be a source of insight. What I hope is that it's going to be rarely the case that right off the bat, you come to the first, industry partner and say, hey, I've got this great idea. Are you interested? And they'll say, well, I'm not sure. So it does take some time to find out. At the end of the day, I think that the more that you progress and clarify your ideas, the best way to do that is in dialogue, where you test your assumptions, test your hypotheses. I think this thing would be valuable. And they would say, well, if it could do this, then it would be valuable. I'll give you another example. People say, oh, I really think that more sorption capacity would be valuable. And the person could say, yeah, probably, but the problem is I need to get the material off the sorbent. So if you could do that without using caustic soda, that would be really valuable because I've got all this health and safety issues associated with the desorption step. And then you're like, oh, the problem for industry is not the sorption capacity of the material, it's actually the desorption step that seems to be the critical problem. That's the sort of insights we want to encourage people to have. So I hope that addresses your question. But again, early stage technology questions, early TRL questions can be contextualized in relatively late stage projects and products. So don't be afraid to ask basic questions. Do you really know how this thing works? Because I don't think it works the way you think it works. So thanks for that question, Bob.
Thanks.
Let me invite any other. Yes.
Peter, I just want to jump in and let you know that there are 5 minutes left in the session.
5 minutes left in the session. Okay. I will invite one more question on this, or I will pick. And I've got a whole range of people who I know, so I can pick on somebody if I want to. I don't know, Marcus Droven. Marcus is on today. Do you guys know Marcus? Marcus, are you there?
Hi, Peter. Yeah, I can hear you.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
What thoughts do you have? You're a modeler. You've worked in industry. Maybe you could give us a brief perspective on whether you've ever been involved in industry collaborations when you were in the industry side.
Yeah, I was. And I think for the most part, you touched on a lot of the things that are crucial, which is showing our industrial partners the value of working with us, of going through the trouble of providing us with the data and the insights that we need to complete successful case studies and go through model or process validation efforts. So I think you touched on a lot of the key things that we got to keep in mind as we work to approach our industrial partners.
Good, I'm glad. I also want to invite, I see Richard Breckenridge is on the line. Richard Breckenridge, of course, is with the Electric Power Research Institute. And Richard, as an expert in water treatment, has actually been a sponsor of water treatment research. So Richard, I'm wondering if I could draw you into a few words of advice from industry's side. How can an early stage, sort of more basic science technologist excite the interest of industry? Richard, can you hear me?
I can. Thank you, Peter. That's a very good question, because we certainly want to link the fundamental to the applied. And I think one of the things we miss out on is looking down the road. What are those steps to deploy something that is been at fundamental research for a while? How can we get that to advance? And having that plan early on makes it a lot easier, instead of having a research project get accomplished at early stage and then it falls into the valley of death and no one sees it. And it could be a great idea. It just didn't make the bridge, it didn't make that gap. We need to bridge that gap. So I think one of the greatest things I've heard you talk about is engaging industry in the beginning. Every project has an industry advocate. You would have an industry advocate if it's going to solve a problem they have. People will invest money into something that's going to help them. So that would be my advice, is to really get this networking and these interactions and these relationships, I think, are vital to the success of our research platform.
Thank you, Richard. And, with that, I want to just say thank you guys. Thank everybody again for your engagement in NAWI. We're here to make the journey together. We're going to now end this session. I think we moved back. Correct me, Betsy, do we have a final session back in the main hall, or are we done for the day? Betsy Stratton.
Hi, sorry, having a moment with my unmute. You are done for the day, Peter.
Okay.
This was the last.
Well, everybody,
today.
I want to thank you again for coming. Use the Hive Bright site. Better yet, tonight, set up your profile. It's mostly done already, but I think that you have a great opportunity to populate your website. Hey, you can put on a nice photo, put a nice backdrop, and personalize it a little bit, and hopefully you can begin to discover all the other people within the NAWI Alliance who are eager to help you on your research. So with that, I want to say thank you again, and I'm going to close out this session and look forward to seeing you all bright and early tomorrow. Bye-bye, everybody.